Hi and welcome to Point 254. My name is Naomi Mutua and today I'm here with Njahira Wangari. Karibu to the show.
Asante sana.
Njahira is very interesting, I think. She is a feminist scholar activist. She is a researcher and a disability inclusion expert. I'm sure a lot of us want to know what that means and what that entails. So maybe you can introduce yourself better. I'm sure I've not done enough justice, and tell us what you do.
Asante sana. If those three things, I name them because I find them quite key to who I am and how I move through the world. That I'm a feminist. It's really just believing that everybody, regardless of their genders, actually gets to have equitable access to services and, privileges actually, and barriers removed for them to as they move through the world. The scholar aspect of it is because I think there is an importance for us to learn. Like we have to keep learning and learning and relearning as we go through the world, as we, age, as we grow up, as we, interact with other people. There's always an opportunity to learn. And so learning is, and I'm looking at this poster of Martin Luther King, which talks about, intelligence plus character. That's the goal of true education. And, just scholarly is just engaging, because also when you sit with what you know and you think that that's everything, that might be a bit limiting. And activism is because I think there's the fact that not everybody has access to everything.
Yeah.
And equitable access. And it's unfortunate that we have to activist and ask for what needs to be availed and, made possible for people. So that's also part of my commitment as I go through the world, to talk about things that are not happening as they should be, and to also tell people who don't know what they are not getting, for them to know what they're not getting and how they can actually access it.
So from what I hear is that the world has not always been inclusive. Some people know how to be and make things inclusive.
Yeah.
Others are ignorant because they just don't care about it. Others may not have the knowledge but are willing to learn.
Yeah.
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 So that is the kind of people you've encountered every day, and that is who we truly are as a society.
Yeah.
So what really inspired you to become this activist?
I'm slowly actually dropping the term activist and wanting to drop it.
Yeah.
Because for a really long time, it's those people who've been marginalized or oppressed who are given the burden. And I'm naming that very intentionally, the burden of activisting.
Because they are experiencing.
Yes, because they're experiencing it. Then everyone else kind of feels like they can sit on the sidelines and not make noise about what's happening. And, not activist. For example, if it's disability inclusion, then you find that the people mostly being highlighted as, disability right activists is persons with disabilities who've experienced oftentimes institutional oppression, that is not by their own fault. It's institutions, it's structures that have not changed, that exclude them. If it's women, if it's, gender diverse people, you're still expected to be the ones talking about it. And with activisting for a long time, you find that those who are named activists or who name themselves activists, then there's almost a negative connotation.
Yes. And the same goes to feminists.
Yes, right? Because you're the troublemakers.
Yes, of course. But we've had to be troublemakers.
Yes, it's out of survival, right? It's not, someone sat down and like, today I just want to make noise. No.
We have to get people to listen to us.
Yes. And it's if I woke up and didn't interact or face any exclusion on the basis of whether me being female with a disability, African, then I wouldn't make noise that day, right? I'd be happy
would
and
be
chappy.
Flowing as it should.
Exactly. Yeah. So people who are very privileged, who don't experience these layers of oppression, then get to move around the world very happy, in bliss.
With blinkers on.
Yes, right?
Rose-colored glasses and everything.
And then call everyone else troublemakers.
Yes.
But they can't see the privilege and the privileges that they enjoy that make it that they don't have to make the noise. So that for me has been a big part of it. And I have muscular dystrophy, which is a rare genetic condition. And for a long time, I didn't know what it was, right? It was just my body changing. You have strangers being like, what is wrong with you? When I was still walking and waddling around. And then now when I use a wheelchair, at least now I know what it is. And I have muscular dystrophy. But, it's still, you have people coming up to you and be like, oh, what happened to you? Or randomly being like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm like, boss, why are you sorry?
Yeah. You didn't cause it.
Yeah, like also it's also projecting. Yeah, they're projecting that, or they see you with a disability and they think, oh, it must be so bad.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
And that's where the story is coming from. And with education, for me, I always go back to education. A lot of my bases and my training is in education. So, and it's understanding that we are what we are trained to be.
True.
So even when you do basic education, for example, in Kenya, if you go through up to Form 4 and we don't have substantial training and education around disability inclusion. So when we come out after high school and people are being ableist and saying the most ignorant things to me, then it's not on them, honestly.
Yeah.
The buck will go back and stop, with the system, with the government. And be like, why are you not training people on how to, be disability inclusive, on how to not target women and gender diverse people, with violence just because they're existing differently. So it still goes back for me to education. And the education is how we're trained how to think. It's how we're trained what is considered norm, what is considered absurd, what is considered regular. So we have to, that's why I trace everything back to education. So even for me, now going into a lot of my work, like with trainings and disability inclusion, is wanting to train people, create platforms where people no longer have the excuse of, oh, I didn't know.
So give them that opportunity, let them utilize the knowledge. Yeah.
Because also we've all been disenfranchised. Yeah. For those with disabilities, we have to learn and unlearn the ableism that comes with it, that we have been trained, right? Because lack of training is also a training.
Yeah.
Lack of training is also a training.
Because it sets your character.
Yeah. So we're conditioned to be people who don't see folks with disabilities or disability as a regular part of the world. So even when you have a disability, you're fighting that internally.
Yeah.
And the whole world, because they have been trained, they're also telling you this is not normative. So you're having to figure it out internally and externally, and still being expected to be out here and chappy and, smiling at everybody, while everyone else gets to ignore, whatever is going on. So yes, for me, it's that, allowing people to do different.
Yeah.
And then, learn, and then, we can expect
learn, relearn.
Yeah.
Unlearn.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, for
so
sure.
many facets of learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, having gone through the Mandela Washington Fellowship, and you particularly focused on civil leadership, how did that shape you in your advocacy and on your fight for disability rights and inclusion?
I went to Rutgers during the fellowship in 2015, and we had the pleasure of being, the one who was coordinating our program was Dr. Quincy Ronald, and he was amongst the people who were there in the civil rights movement in the US. And, close friends with a lot of the people in the forefront. And I got to realize that disability justice and racial justice and all these inequalities are very intertwined. Because around then it was coming across stories of, the Black Panthers in the US and in the civil rights movement, how a good bunch of them were actually disabled people who were amongst the Black Panthers. Yeah. And that is rarely, talked about.
We don't see those stories.
Yeah, we don't see them. And also talking about, also during that time, I got to interact with a bit of organizations for persons with disabilities, and learning about, their disability rights movement and activism over the years, how they would have protests, block out buildings, the Capitol building and others, to protest and act for these rights in a way of, when diplomacy fails, actually, it's okay to
protest.
And protest. And this is, for example, even in the Kenyan constitution, it's a legally provided for provision that this is one of the ways that you can go for it. So my experience in Rutgers, I got to go for the Americans with Disabilities Act parade, which was I think it was in June, because we were there around June or July. And I was in a sea of disabled people. That was, I think, the most life impacting at that time for my 25-year-old self that I had experienced. To come from Kenya, where even then I had not experienced I was struggling a lot with movement. So also during the fellowship, I got to use my fast mobility aids. And I got to use it every day. And it was so much freedom.
Yeah.
It was
life-changing.
Life-changing, honestly. Yeah. And it was, experiencing buses that had ramps. I didn't have to, struggle getting into public transport, going into trains and all of that. It was very easy getting into taxis and seeing how life can really be smooth. And then also now going for that parade, seeing as if, okay, actually, we can have fun. We can have a whole world of fun.
Yeah.
And it's not that disabled people are the minority. And I want to flag that. I use the term disabled people and persons with disabilities interchangeably under the UN Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities. The term to use is persons with disabilities. Yeah. Also, in the same spirit, persons with disabilities can identify differently. So I love using disabled people by how it centers persons with disabilities themselves in our stories and in the stories of the world. So that for me, the experience in Rutgers was mind-changing and life-changing, really, because I could see all the possibilities. I could come back and my activism changed.
You know what is possible.
Yes, and I know
what is available.
Yes, and it's also not asking for too much, because that's also the thing.
It's available.
Yes, it's available. Before, I'd just been dreaming and be like, oh, it might be whatever, but it was such an experience to, also be with other folks with disabilities from the African continent, and for all of us to experience that, the freedom that comes with accessibility. So, and then knowing what is back home, to some point, was also very bittersweet to come back.
I know. Yeah.
Because with public transport now, we've had the Persons with Disabilities Act for 10 years, going 11 years now in Kenya. We have the Persons with Disabilities Act of 2003. We still don't have accessible transport in Kenya. We still have public buildings, being very inaccessible. You still have, the education system has not been mainstreamed to have disability inclusion. Our healthcare is still, whatever it is, it's not very accessible to persons with disabilities. So it's still seeing that pain. So even for me, dropping the activism hat is wanting to actually take back on my educator hat.
Okay.
And being like, with all this experience that I have, actually, the back is on all of you. Like, for every non-disabled person, can you learn? And then we can
learn
talk.
And understand.
Yes, and then we can talk from, the same playing field. Yes. Yeah.
Like, you've seen, you've understood, you've learned.
Yeah.
Then now we can work towards a better progress.
Yeah, no more excuses kind of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. How do you think, if you could elaborate on the principles of disability justice, how do they intersect with broader social justice movements? What are your thoughts on that? And particularly as we are leading towards International Women's Day, particularly in the context of women's rights.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So disability justice was, or dare call it a term that was coined by queer, disabled, trans, non-binary, Black and brown Americans with disabilities. And that was actually about 10 years ago, if you'd believe.
And not too far.
Yeah.
It's just very recent.
Now that it's becoming more popular, and why they came about it, and a big part of the people who are behind it is Since Invalid, which is a group of artists with disabilities who, just try to reimagine how community living can be for the world when you are faced with all of those, all those intersecting identities that I mentioned who are part of coining disability justice, is because they realized that talking about disability rights itself alone was not serving anybody. It was leaving out all of those other marginalized entities, right? If you're female, if you're gender diverse, if you're not white, then those privileges that are enshrined within disability rights conversations are not automatically given to you. So disability justice, some of the principles, there are 10 principles. I can't get into any of them, all of them. But I love one that is intersectionality. And to your question, like intersectionality really means that we think about all the layers of oppression, all the layers of privilege, right? That everyone moves through the world with. And another principle is cross identity solidarity. That as I say I'm a feminist, as I say I'm a disability activist, or as I say I'm, queer or whatever other identity that I may have, then we also have to think across the board. We can't do single issue things, as Audre Lorde said. Yeah, single
because life intersects.
Yes,
anyway.
it does.
Yeah.
Every single day.
You don't have this part of your life and that part of your life.
Yes.
Everything affects everything.
And the difference with that with disability rights is where you'd find, for example, there's a very specific article on women with disabilities. Yes, granted, it's because of the layers of oppression that women with disabilities face. It's issues of forced sterilization. It's legal capacity being more weaponized, for example, like in the Marriage Act. I love telling people these facts. In the Marriage Act of, I think, 2018 or 2019 in Kenya, one of the provisions that shows how intersectional rights can be is that you having a psychosocial disability or being declared mentally unstable can be grounds for divorce.
Okay.
Most people rarely know
gives us
this.
pause.
Yes.
So if I have a mental illness, a mental health challenge, it's ground for divorce.
Yes. So if you have an abusive partner who wants to manipulate you to the point of convincing, manipulating also the healthcare system and having you admitted into the psych ward
or
and
even
whatnot
being
and
part
whatnot.
of the cause of this mental illness.
Yes, but also you see, because they might want to have a record of you being mentally unstable,
so they can.
And how that status rides upon the fact that folks with psychosocial disabilities in Kenya do not have the legal capacity. For example, if I have been identified with a psychosocial disability, then I don't have the right to stand before a court of law.
To represent myself.
To represent yourself.
I have to have someone else representing me.
Yes.
And they can decide to manipulate that situation.
So that is a disability rights issue, right? Then it comes and intersects with the women's rights issue.
Yes.
Right? Yes. And marriage equality things when it now features in the Marriage Act in Kenya. So intersectionality and cross-identity things, we have to think about it. Yeah. And I think for me, it's also the fact that disability justice, the other principle I'll mention is that it calls for leadership from the most oppressed. That you have to listen. You have to listen, for example, in this conversation around end femicide, we have to listen to the women. We have to let them guide, and not the tokenized way.
No.
We've also seen how that has worked, right? Or you have, just someone who'll peddle all the most patriarchal ways, but just because they're female, then you're told, sile ni moja wenyu.
And then, which means it really affects the movement,
Yes. Yeah. So it's also that, and also the training how to be oppressive. We're all trained how to be. It's a choice. We get to choose every day whether we want to be horrible people or we want to be
people.
kind.
Yeah. Wow. It's important that, unfortunately for us who are abled, we don't always think about how things affect us just because we're not experiencing it in that moment.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I discovered about you is that as we grow older, you're very I will not focus, but you've thought about this and you're active in that space. As we grow older, we encounter disabilities because our bodies break down. It's natural progression. We actually don't think that we will get to that stage, but chances are most of us will. How do you work with individuals to make homes, spaces, workspaces safer for people with disabilities, and especially as they grow older? Because it's something we don't really think about.
Yeah.
We will expect that there'll be someone there to help us. We'll expect that those people will adapt our homes for us, but we don't do it for ourselves.
Yeah.
we just have it. I don't, or at least for myself, I really hadn't thought about it. So the foresight is lacking.
Yeah.
So how do you experience and work around that?
So some of the so this for me has come from a point, and I tell people, I joke and say that I grow with my muscular dystrophy. It's a progressive condition, so it's my way of being like, folks, we're actually just growing old. Even when I meet someone who, for example, met me like 10, 20 years ago, like, oh, what happened? I grew old.
Your body changed.
Body changed. Like, that's what time does, right?
Yeah.
It changes as it changes the physical vessels that carry us. So it's also that. And I've had the advantage of training to know how to think about disability, to know in terms of, functional and educational assessments for disability, to know how to even advise about changing of spaces. Also, over time, I've had to adjust my living spaces, whether familiarly or, in my home, I've had to apply whatever I know to make that continually adjustable. And because it's progressive, muscular dystrophy has shown me that the thing that can work today will not work 5 years from now. A thing that worked 10 years ago in my living space does not work now. So it's also that I have the advantage of foresight, if you may, to know that actually our bodies are amazing vessels. They carry us through every day, but also we have to support them. Because it's unfair to ourselves to expect that our bodies are going to function the same way, are going to have the same amount of strength every day. It's also a bit ignorant, but also that's what the machines expect us to do. The capitalism, the whatnot. They want us to believe that you can have the same amount of energy, that you should be fine, that you have only a limited number of off days, for example, from work, and that number doesn't increase as you grow older.
You need more rest, you need more breaks, more time for you to heal.
It's the same number, whether you're 17, okay, not 17, 18, because you shouldn't be working at 17. Or
18 or 75
or 59, just before the retirement age, you have the same number of. So for me, it's that. It's also seeing how with especially newly retired people, I'm seeing most of us are, especially if you're in formal employment, then you're working from around when you're in your early to mid 20s, all the way to when you're in your late 50s, 60s. So if at some point in between here you build a home or you purchase a home, then you're purchasing a home, for example, when you're 30 something or 20 something, you build a home. 20 years later, that home will not be for you.
Those stairs that you put.
And
your room on the first floor.
It's not going to work for you anymore. And why I come in as now as a disability advisor and also offering assessments is also showing you that, one, they're very inexpensive home available solutions that we can make. It doesn't mean that we can definitely live in those mansions, but also there are things like stairs lifts. The lifts, either it's a seat that you sit on and then it takes you all the way to the first floor, or it's an elevator if you can afford it, like whatever it is, or you can build a ramp on the outside. So it's also coming in, assessing your home space, whether it's for yourself or an elderly person, because also this minimizes the injuries. If you have reduced mobility and you're trying to go up and down stairs and they don't have railings on both sides, also because most people, never put railings, or if they put railings, they'll put it on one side. So it's that you have a higher risk of falling, you have a higher risk of injuries. It can be either broken bones, whatever. It can be an injury that heals, but also within that time, you need comfort. Also, for this extends for me when I'm thinking about is also because of the caregivers. The people who are at home helping our grandmothers and our parents, is the elderly, then moving from a wheelchair to whatever. If that person, the bedroom is on the first floor, then you're having to call like 4 people.
To carry one person.
To carry one person. So that means also it's more expensive for the family. To ensure that these people all the time, there's less independence for this person. They can't move from the bedroom to the living room to the kitchen, grab something. It's also the positioning of things like sockets, right? If you want to charge something, can you just plug it
so
to?
far down.
Yes, all the way far down. So it doesn't work practically. And also over time, if we reuse parts of our bodies, then they end up causing injuries that are long term that we don't need. So it's also that saying that we can adjust our lives and we don't have to wait for it to be an emergency. There are things that we can do now, and the homes will still be,
as
fancy
beautiful
and cute. Yes, and all of that. Also, it's also much more cheaper if you're doing that from the beginning.
Than having to readjust.
Yes, than having to readjust. So for me, hopefully we get institutions or folks like architects and engineers to also embrace and have this within their curriculums, and to ensure that disability inclusion and the standards, we have ISO standards for accessibility in build structures. We have them in Kenya, but also most people don't know. So those are the people that we need, the duty bearers to implement the Persons with Disabilities Act. Also in hospitals, if we're talking about building new hospitals, if it's training of healthcare professionals, oftentimes they're trained to fix and cure. So when you have a disability and it's lifelong, they're not curing you in any way, but also you remain as a disabled person. And non-disabled people are rarely trained also how to give that care. So if we can have more disability conscious healthcare training, also they know in terms of, there's a time I was in hospital and I remember being in the midst of it, post-surgery, and having to explain to people how to lift me safely.
You had to explain it to them?
Yes. Because they don't know how to, lift safely a body that has muscular dystrophy, which is different from a body that has cerebral palsy, which is different from a body that has spinal cord injury. So they don't have those specific training. So a lift that you would do to someone who has, say, spinal cord injury, lower body, and has upper body strength, then it's very different than when you're dealing with someone else with muscular dystrophy or another disability. So even that, it's wrong.
And it should be part of the education system at different levels.
Yes, at different levels. That by the time a nurse is, finishing, and they're nice and whatever, but I'm like, I get.
But they need the training.
They need the training so that in that point, when you're, in a very vulnerable position, you're not having to pause to explain. If it's a female who has a disability and is going to a healthcare facility, we've often shared stories with other women with disabilities, how when you roll up, the first thing, they often think that you were there for physiotherapy. Honestly, the minute they see you with a mobility aid,
you can't be sick, you
you just want your disability to be fixed.
That's
right?
a terrible stereotype.
Yes, but also that's how they've been trained. That goes back to the training. It's not even about the individual people themselves. It's the training that is training them to be like that.
It didn't enable them to learn
think
this.
about other possibilities. So within that, then that bias is already there when you go and meet a professional. When you rock up and you're there asking for contraceptives, for example. Right? Because on the one side, also women with disabilities are not expected to be sexual.
No, like why? I mean, why would you?
And also in a state,
fact, unfortunately, the worst is why would someone be interested in you?
Yes, because we've been devalued, right? There's a complete devaluation of persons with disabilities and really persons with disabilities, also women with disabilities. So how dare you? Like, how would you dare do that? Or if you have,
or want this for yourself?
Yes, or want this for yourself. Or if you have a lover, then immediately everybody assumes, they're your caregiver. Oh, you must be such an angel to be this person. So that's really how also biases show up, right? It's random people on the street wanting, or in the mall wanting to pray for you. I'm like, boss, you don't even know my name. Why do you want to pray for me? And why do you think I want to be cured?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Looking ahead, what do you want to do in terms of your aspirations, your dreams? Your thoughts for the future to advance disability rights and inclusion? And especially, like you said, you're a scholar, especially in education and in healthcare and sexual reproductive health and rights. It's a bit of a big question. Okay, but basically, how do you want to, and what do you think we can do to advance this disability rights? And what are you wanting
yes.
to do?
So for me, when I think about education specifically and how education is done, it's the fact that one, we have to stop making inclusive education as a thing that is provided for to learners with disabilities, because it's not everybody who has access or the privilege of the label of disability. Yeah. Like,
it should be available to everyone.
Yeah, it should be available. And that really is what inclusive education is. In my master's, I went back to the States a few years later to Syracuse and did a master's in inclusive education. And it's learning about how actually inclusive education demands that we look about at all the intersectional existences of people. That is, I'm seeing you, I'm thinking about if that child comes to school in the morning, have they eaten?
Yeah.
Are they in an abusive situation at home? Are they, how is their housing situation at home? Are they okay to learn anything that morning? Do they have, for example, now you can't register for national examinations without a birth certificate in Kenya. So what about the people who are from the Somali community or from the Nubian community or folks in Northeastern, the Turkana Pokots, who, they have home births. Birth registration is not a thing. So are we also leaving out and excluding all of these people from education?
And who might not even know the importance of just going through that process, because it affects them later on. Just the lack of knowledge.
So you'll find kids who actually learn and then end up not taking national examinations. So that completely limits how far they can go. So when I think of myself as an inclusive education scholar, I used to highlight these injustices that are not just disability specific. We have to think about it all round. Are you in a single parent home? And what does that look like? How is your care? How much work at home do you have to do in the evening? How much homework am I giving you? Right? Are you getting punished if you come to school in the morning without having done your homework? Well, the whole time you're perhaps the firstborn and you are taking care of your siblings. You have an ailing parent at home. So how does that all feature? And that burden is what we have to recognize is what limits education. It's not. It's the burden, for example, if there's a parent with a child with a disability, they already have the extra burden of figuring out how will my child get to school, how will, get to hospital, all of those things. And in Kenyan law, parents of children with disabilities are not tax exempted.
Yet you're the caregivers.
Yeah. Your child will get exempted when they reach 18.
Yeah.
But we don't care how
you get to 18.
Yes, how you get to 18.
Yeah.
We don't care about that. You figure it out.
Yeah.
When they get to 18, we'll take over.
Of course, yeah.
And also, we don't care how they'll get to 18, whether they have an education, whether they have access to help.
Get to 18.
Right? Yeah, so it's that. It's our laws have to have a more disability justice approach because it demands a whole lot more. And so for me, my hope is that we take a more disability justice approach to everything, not just disability issues, to everything. Yeah, that because then it serves everybody. It serves everybody, and we can all not work towards a future. We can work towards a now. Today, towards a today, because it's 2024. There's so many things I'm like,
is already here.
The future is already here. The future is already here, and time is up, right? We no longer have the excuse, or we don't know if it's in terms of disability. We're here. There are people with disabilities who are experts in the area, even without disability, non-disabled people who are experts in the area. So whenever things are being thought out, then we have to be in the room. If it's not just disabled people, right? It's everybody.
It's everybody needs to be included.
Needs to be in the room. And also that room needs to have an adjustable desk, right? It has to have light censored alarms for the deaf, right? It has to have sign language. It has to have all those things. It has to have a nursery on the corner for the kids, for
just think about every single person who needs to be in that room and what they need.
You need to have, like a space for walkers for the elderly when they come in, strolling in.
Okay. You've certainly given us very many things to think about.
Yeah.
I think myself, I'll be thinking through life differently, thinking through what I need to do as an individual to make life more inclusive for everyone. Any last words? Maybe some inspiration for us?
We need to dance more.
Yeah. Yeah.
We need to dance
Yeah.
more, enjoy music more. Life is already too serious. Like there's already so much that's designed to work against us. You have to allow yourself a chance at fun.
What's your favorite song to dance to then?
Hey, it changes every day. But at the moment, my niece has a presentation in school next Monday. So she's been having all of us in the house singing this song to the point where it's not like the song we're all singing in the head. Like, Nina Serena Yesu. Like, folks, it's just music. It's the Three Little Birds.
Yeah.
By Bob Marley. I'm still hoping, planning to see that. It's that just anything that gets you dancing, find it. It doesn't even have to make sense, right?
Just brings joy.
It just brings joy. We have to grab that. We have to grab a joy with all the hands, because otherwise, you're still gonna end up either in that 8 to 5, either in that thing with a client or whatever. Just find whatever moments of joy you can in your day, and then we move forward from there.
Okay. Thank you. When we'll look out for those moments of joy. And if they don't happen, we will create them.
Oh, we must.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been
I
feel like I've also talked a year out.
No, please. I've learned a lot. Yeah. So that's very important.
I'm glad to hear.
Thank you so much for being here. We do hope to get to talk to you again some other time. And if not here, at another platform.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. See you on the next episode.